like scary movies? What's your favorite scary movie?
So now that the new Scream movie is coming out on Friday, it's time for me to start my review series of all the other Scream movies leading up to the new one. Then I'll review that one, and then I'll do a ranking of all 5 movies. So this is going to be for the original Scream that came out in 1996, which was also the year I was born, which is really cool. It's going to be a full spoiler review. I'm going to go talk about every single specific thing that happened to this movie, spoiler-filled. So if for whatever reason you haven't seen Scream yet, it's been out for 25 years, but if you haven't seen it, I would highly suggest watching it before you watch this video. It's very, very good. It's a classic horror movie, and it gets better with every watch. I don't want to ruin the twists and turns for you, so please, please go and watch it if you haven't seen it somehow, and then come back and watch this video afterwards. It would work much better that way. So normally what I do for spoiler reviews is it's kind of more chill, more laid back. I'm not necessarily going to edit as much. I'm not going to touch on my points as quickly, because normally when I do spoiler-free reviews for new movies, I kind of go positives, negatives, score, and that's pretty much it. What I tend to do for spoiler reviews is I will go more in-depth. I'll kind of go chronologically throughout the movie and then talk about certain things as they happen, scene to scene, if I feel like they warrant mentioning. So starting right off, might as well get right into it. The beginning scene, the whole opening sequence involving Drew Barrymore's Casey and the call from Ghostface is phenomenal. It's not just one of the best opening scenes in any horror movie, it's one of the best opening scenes in any movie, period. Every time I watch it, I am absolutely enthralled, and I can't keep my eyes off the screen, even though I've seen it many, many times, and I know exactly what's going to happen. It's almost like, as great as the rest of the movie is, it never quite hits the high of this opening scene. That's how great it is, because we all know, I love this movie. We don't all know that, but I know I love this movie, and the rest of it is great, but somehow I don't think any Scream movie will ever touch what this opening sequence did. Because the way it builds the tension from the start, I mean, the first thing you hear is the phone call, and then you see Casey answering the phone, and it just keeps ramping up from there. I mean, because at the beginning, it's kind of a normal, cordial conversation. It seems like it's a wrong number, and then they call her back, and they want to talk, and then asking her if she has a boyfriend and stuff, and about her favorite scary movie. So it all seems pretty nice, up until the point where I think it's Billy on the phone at this time. And then it's Stu who ends up actually in the Ghostface costume, but we'll get to that. Up until the point where Billy says, I want to see who I'm looking at. That kind of changes everything, because up until that point, the conversation had been going very well, very nice, and Casey seemed like she was totally comfortable. And then when that was said, everything kind of shifted, and she realizes, oh shit, there's something weird going on. I should probably hang up and stop talking to this person. Now, one little small issue I have with this whole sequence is, why does she keep answering the phone? That's always bothered me a little bit, like, just don't answer. Now, people are going to say, well, they would have came in and killed her anyway. Of course, but they wouldn't have gotten to do all of the things they wanted to do. They don't get to play the games with her, and certainly they would have had a lot less fun with it, because Ghostface tends to like to play with his victims a little bit, and obviously we see this in this opening scene. So I wonder what would have happened had she just stopped answering the phone and then they weren't able to do that anymore. So that's just something that stuck in my mind a little bit. I thought I pointed out. So from that point on, she starts really getting worried, like something bad's going on. And Drew Barrymore does a phenomenal job in this scene, kind of portraying what a person in this situation would act like. I mean, it 100% believable. This is exactly what I think any human would be like in this situation. I mean, you're home alone out in the middle of nowhere, and someone who you don't know who it is with a creepy voice. By the way, the Ghostface voice changer, the voice modulator, is awesome. I wish you could buy it somewhere, but I can't find it. It'd be really cool. I mean, maybe a little too far to like mess with your friends with it or something, but I always thought it'd be cool to have one of those. Anyway, so Casey starts getting really worried, and then she tells about her boyfriend, and they're like, it wouldn't have to be Steve, would he? And he shows up, and this scene is great as well, because this is where they start the game and start asking her questions, and I absolutely love when they trick her with the Friday the 13th thing, because I feel like, especially under stress and not thinking straight and trying to answer as quickly as you can, most people would have probably said the same thing. They would have said Jason, which is not true because it's actually Mrs. Voorhees who was the killer in the first one. I love that they tricked it with that. That was brilliant because I know people in real life who are avid horror fans who'd say the same thing. And obviously, they weren't under that kind of stress in that situation, so it makes total sense that she would say that. Steve, his death is brutal. See all of his intestines and guts and everything hanging out. That was rough. And then they come in the house and drag Casey out. There's a little struggle there. Now, another small problem I'll have with this scene is that so I think it's Stu in the Ghostface costume at this point. How is Stu able to hang Casey up from that tree so quickly? Because we see her parents get home, and then we see him dragging her when she's holding the phone and everything, which was absolutely gutting. No pun intended. Maybe a little bit. But that was just gut-wrenching to see, her mom on the phone, hearing her barely breathing, and then walks out and then sees her hanging by a tree. A little fast that they're able to do that so quickly, but again, these are minor things compared to how great the movie is. So at this point, we get introduced to our protagonist, who is Sidney, who is, in my opinion, probably the best final girl of all time. She's great. Neve Campbell does an amazing job as this character, movie to movie, and the first one is no exception. Just great character. And then we also get introduced to Billy, who, as we know, ends up being one of the main killers. And from the moment we see him, we think, this guy's suspicious. Like, there's something off about him. He seems very creepy, and I think he's probably going to end up being the killer. Now, why this is so brilliant is you think this, and then you're like, no, it can't be him. That'd be way too obvious. He's obviously a red herring. I mean, it's got to be someone else. And then they do the whole trick with the phone where he drops the phone. And you're like, oh, wow. And then his phone records are clean, and then you're like, it's not him. So that they resolve that, and then we kind of forget about him as a potential killer for a while, and then there's a moment. I'll get back to the Billy thing, but just how they handled Billy in this entire movie, I thought was great, because everything in your head is telling you he's way too obvious, he's way too suspicious, he's way too creepy to be the killer. It can't possibly be him. And then when it ends up being him, it's, first of all, I'll get to that. Sorry, I'm not trying to jump ahead here, but I just wanted to mention how great everything they did with Billy was in this movie and how they executed that whole thing. I thought that was awesome. We get introduced to this. We start slowly getting pieces of the fact that Sidney lost her mom about a year ago. I think actually in the movie, the 1 year anniversary of her mom's death comes up. And we get hints of it here and there, and then later on in the movie on TV after, when there's the newscast from Gale Weathers talking about the kids, that Casey and Steve that died, she said, oh, this is kind of reminiscent of, Maureen Prescott, who died a year ago, and then now we kind of figure out exactly what happened. That whole thing is done very well too, because there's the Cotton Weary thing where Sidney basically said that Cotton Weary was the one that killed her mom, and she was sure of it, and she saw him walking out with the coat. But Gale Weathers thinks that that's not true, and she's talked to Cotton a bunch of times and said his story's never changed, and she kind of almost convinces Sidney a little bit, and she says, you're not so sure anymore, are you? That's great stuff, because Sidney was so sure for this long that this guy had killed her mom, and she, even though her mom was gone, she thought she had closure on the whole thing. Come to find out, it wasn't her, and it was actually these other two people who we'll get to later. Obviously, I already said who the killers are, but we'll get to that when they talk about that later in the movie. Let's see. I'm trying to figure out, because the first time we see Billy is not when we see the phone. So I think, oh, right, because after that we get to the school, and then there's everyone talking. We get introduced to all the other characters like Tatum and Stu and Randy, and honestly, we feel like any of these people could be the killer. And there's the thing where Stu's being obnoxious when Sidney's like, how do you gut someone and take a knife? And Billy is like, shut up, idiot. So it doesn't seem like they're in on it together. Although there's one part where Stu says, I didn't kill anybody. And Billy's like, nobody said you did. That part's a little bit of a hint. But other than that, it doesn't seem like they're actually that good of friends until later in the movie when we find out that they're the two killers. But Billy's always, calling Stu out like, come on, man, subtlety, shit like that. We certainly think could be Randy because of his obsession with movies and horror movies and how everything works. So, enjoyed that. And then there's a whole thing where they said only a man could do that, which maybe it's actually a woman that's doing it. So they plant all these little seeds, making us think maybe it's one person, maybe it's another person, and keeps us guessing from start to finish, which is something that I love about all these Scream movies, is that in every other horror franchise for the most part, except for like maybe the first Friday the 13th, which they don't even do that whodunit right, because this is a character, the reveal of that killer is someone, spoilers for Friday the 13th, the first one, the original, is someone we just met. So that doesn't really work. In the Scream movies, we don't know who the killer is. And we don't know until the end, and we're trying to figure out who it is. And we know it's somebody that we know, at least one person that we know. Sometimes it's two killers. Actually, most of the time it's been two so far. But I'm trying to figure out who it is. And they keep throwing us off guard, and they keep making us think it's one person, and no, it can't be them. It's because of this, and it's got to be another person. Love that. All four of the Scream movies do a phenomenal job keeping us guessing who the killer is. And I'll talk about those in the other movies as we go along, but this one does a great job of it. And I love the interactions between the characters. Another thing I love about this movie is the fact that these characters that we get to know, these kids, Sidney and her friend group, they feel like normal people. They don't just feel like caricatures. They don't feel like cannon fodder. And they're well acted too. So not like Friday the 13th, which all these people are horribly acted and totally ridiculous, and they're just there to be naked and do drugs and get killed by Jason. In this one, they all have distinct personalities. They're all portrayed very well by their actors, and they all have different reasons as to why it could possibly be them or it might not be them. So I enjoy that very much about this movie, and honestly, all the Scream movies. It's something that not too many horror movies have, is a great cast of characters that we actually like and care about, and they all have distinct personalities, and they seem like real people, which, that was great. Love that. One of the best performed horror franchises, honestly, ever. Like, Sidney, I said, was my favorite final girl. Neve Campbell's gives one of the best performances as far as final girls go. Maybe the best. That's how great I think she is, and how great I think the entire cast is, and not just this movie, but the entire franchise. So, love that. And then this is also kind of the introduction to the meta-ness of it. How it's a horror movie, but it's also horror satire. And I think they balance that perfectly, because you never lose the tension. You never feel like it's a parody, but you also love that it's kind of a deconstruction of horror movies, and they talk about the rules and everything. And Randy, obviously, even in the first time we see him, he's talking about horror movies and stuff. So he works at a video store. Love all that. And then we get the thing with Billy and the phone, and he gets arrested, and then so at this point you're kind of confused. You're like, wait a minute. So we're only like maybe 20 minutes, half hour into the movie, and we already know who the killer is? That can't be right. And then they say that he's innocent because someone else, it's a Ghostface, calls Sidney while Billy's in jail. It's like, oh, can't be Billy then. So now we're trying to figure out who it is, and they try to tell you that it's Sidney's dad. They try very hard to convince you of that. Now, I was convinced it might have been him, but that probably wouldn't have worked because we don't even know him. We got him in like one scene at the beginning of the movie when he comes in Sidney's room and then tells her he's leaving, but they plant all these seeds like saying that he never showed up to his hotel and everything. But Randy, being the horror fanatic that he is in the video store scene, tells us exactly what's going on. Randy's like, no, it's not him. He's a red herring. He's probably dead. It's Billy. It's definitely Billy. And that scene should have given it away because Randy ends up basically being right about every single thing in this movie. Stu is defending Billy, which should have been another giveaway, but I didn't realize it at the time. That whole video store scene was awesome, where Randy starts yelling everything. You should know the rules. Very, very simple formula. Everyone's a suspect. And even admits, like, yeah, if it's a horror movie, I'd be the prime suspect. Now, certainly when you're watching it for the first time, you think it might be him, but you think it's probably not, though, because of how much he's admitting that, yeah, he'd be a prime suspect and all that, and how he's saying, no, their dad's probably dead. Now, it could have been interesting if it was him, certainly. That's why they got to make it so you believe that any of these people can be the killer, and it'd be interesting if several of them were. That's how these movies work. So that's why the dad plot line, I thought, it didn't quite land as much as it should have, because we can't be thinking, you can't convince us that he's the killer when we've barely seen him, because that wouldn't be interesting. But they did it very well, because it didn't end up being him. So I like what they did with that. And Randy, again, super meta, knowing everything, but it's not fourth wall breaking, and it's not satire. Or it is satire, but it's not a parody, because it's also within the movie he's saying this stuff. So it makes sense, because if this were happening to us in real life, a lot of us would be saying those same things. A lot of us that were horror fans would be talking about the rules and who are the prime suspects and who we think it is and that kind of thing. So I absolutely love that about the movie. Randy is one of my favorite characters, and we'll talk more about that and why I'm kind of pissed with what they ended up doing with him. But for now, just easily one of the best characters in the movie. And then so half of the movie, like the whole second half of the movie, takes place at this party, and I don't think I really missed anything from this point. I mean, you got the interaction at school between Sidney and Billy, where he says that it's not me, I was in jail, remember? And he's still acting really creepy, so you're still suspicious of him, like, what the hell? What's he up to? And then it says the thing about her mom, which was really uncool. And Sidney, there's also the scream, the Ghostface in the bathroom, which is a little bit confusing, because I don't actually think that was Billy or Stu. I think that was just someone fucking around, because the boots and everything threw me off. I don't remember ever seeing them have boots before. People have different interpretations of that. So, and then school gets canceled for however long, and then they have the party. One thing that I also am confused about, which is the scene where Sidney and Casey are at the store getting supplies for the party, and Ghostface is hanging out over there and kind of creeping on them and lurking around the corner. So who was that? And there are several different theories as to who that could be. And it certainly could have been, I guess, so where was Stu at this point? He was at his house, right? Getting ready for the party. Billy, we feel like, was at the school because he was about to kill Principal Himbry, I think it is. Played by Henry Winkler, who did an awesome job in that role. Just the scene where he keeps seeing himself in the mirror and getting scared, and then like, ooh, like that was awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And then he ends up dying, but it was confusing to me as to who that was. Some people say it was actually, and some people think maybe it was Billy. Maybe he did have time to go there, but the timing doesn't seem to work out for it to be either one of them. Maybe it was nobody. Maybe it was just another person screwing around, because those costumes were readily available anywhere, so anyone could have been doing that. But that's something I've always wondered about, and I've seen there are several different theories about that, but people thinking it's is certainly interesting. Then we get the party, and it's like half the movie, which I forgot how long the party scene was. And honestly, the entire party sequence is great. I mean, first of all, you get the building up of the romance between Dewey and Gale, which is awesome. I totally believe that chemistry, which it makes sense that they actually met filming this movie and then started dating and then got married in real life, which you totally buy that, because their chemistry is phenomenal. It certainly on paper doesn't seem like a couple that would work, but just it totally did. One of the best, honestly, maybe the best couple in this franchise. I mean, there aren't too many that actually go on for very long, so that's a pretty easy pick, but especially in this movie, just phenomenal chemistry, and you would have never thought, and then once they actually started interacting, you're like, oh wow, this really works. There's some actual fire there. So we get the start of that, and that budding romance gets introduced and builds up throughout the rest of the second half of the movie, which I very much enjoyed. And then we get the stuff where they watch Halloween, and Randy talks about all the rules, which I touched on a little bit earlier, but all that's awesome. He talks about, don't have sex, don't drink and do drugs. He says that while he's drinking, which is really funny. Like, oh, hey, and yeah, he holds it up. And then third, most importantly, never ever say, I'll be right back, because you won't be back. And then Stu says, I'll be right back. just so much great stuff in this movie. Every time I watch it, it gets better and better. I appreciate it more and more. I think the first time I watched it, I liked it, but I hadn't fully realized how clever this movie is. Like, it is smart as hell. And like I said, not only is it a great horror movie, but it's also a great deconstruction of the horror genre. And it toes that line perfectly. Like, no other movie or movie franchise has done it like this. Up until this point, and even since, honestly, Scream is the gold standard as far as that goes. And the first movie is definitely the epitome of that. So, next, so we get the whole thing. Oh, okay, so Dewey and Gale, when they're walking down, and then they see the car, they see Neil Prescott, Sidney's dad's car, and then we're like, it's kind of crashed in the woods. We're like, what? What's going on here? So he's here. Like, oh shit, is it him? Again, they're trying to make us think that it's him, but you're hoping that's not, at least if you're someone like me, or me specifically. I was hoping it wasn't him, because that, again, we'd barely seen him throughout the movie, so that wouldn't have had the satisfaction that it should, and then that a killer reveal should. And then you get the scene between Sidney and Billy, which he's still acting really creepy. He's like, you don't think it was me, do you? And this is after they have sex and Sidney loses her virginity, so now she's not safe anymore because of the horror rules. That is a great scene, first of all, that entire scene with them talking and everything. And then, so before that, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing back and forth a little bit here. It's hard to keep track of everything from start to finish because there's so many different things going on at this party. But before that, you get the scene where Billy shows up, and there's a little bit of hint as to who the killers are, because Billy and Stu actually give a little bit of a nod to each other. So I did not pick up on that the first time I watched it, but now that I know, it's super obvious. Like, if someone noticed that the first time they watched it, like, what the hell was that? And I think I was definitely either watching it with someone or watching someone's reaction to the movie for the first time, and they picked up on it. They're like, what was that? That was weird. I'm like, hope they didn't figure it out already. But, so, and then Tatum's death obviously had happened at some point in time during this sequence as well. I think I skipped over that a little bit. It was a well-done sequence, but another small issue with the movie is that I don't think that a garage would kill her that way. That doesn't really make any sense. I'm almost certain that would not work that way. The garage wouldn't lift her up and kill her like that. But it was a cool kill anyway, even though it doesn't really make any sense. But another very intense scene as well. So that must have been Stu at that point, right? Because he snuck off to get more beer, and then... No, wait a minute. That might have been... I think it was Billy, actually. And that's why he gives him the nod when he comes into the party. Like, yeah, I did it. It's hard to keep track. And I know that there are certainly people that have figured out exactly who's who because of not only timing, but also mannerisms and movements and the way they hold the knife and everything. And also, another thing I got to mention about Ghostface as a killer, not just in this movie, but in the entire franchise and as a concept, is that it's just a regular person. It's not a supernatural killer. It's not someone that can kill you in your dreams. It's not some zombie that can't be killed. It's a regular person. And this movie definitely shows that. Like, there are many scenes where Ghostface is falling down and tripping and is clumsy and throwing stuff at him. He's like, ah! So I love that it's a real person, and it feels more realistic. Like, something like this could absolutely happen in real life. So that's another thing that I really appreciate about this franchise is the feeling of it's a scary costume, scary idea, scary killer/killers, but they're also vulnerable because they're people. They're just regular people. And certainly, I think Stu is definitely very clumsy, and you see that in the scenes that he's in, slipping around and falling around and stuff. I love that. I think that is perfect, and it makes total sense, given that, again, these are just regular people. So another aspect of this movie and the entire franchise that I love is the fact that Ghostface is just a normal person who is totally vulnerable and killable, and sometimes will screw up. So that makes it more interesting to me. When there's just an unkillable killer, that can get old, and it's like, what's the point anymore? That's an issue I had with Halloween Kills. I'm not going to get into specifics on that, but it's like, the guy just nothing can hurt him or kill him anymore. So what are we even doing? It loses all the stakes. It loses all the emotional weight. It's like none of this. He's just gonna end up killing everyone, and then maybe in the end they'll find some dumb excuse to kill him, which wouldn't be consistent. So love that part. I went on about that a little bit too long, maybe, but I wanted to point out how much I appreciate that Ghostface is a regular person, and we definitely see that. And also, like I said before, how it changes every movie, who Ghostface is, and the mystery unraveling and trying to figure out who it is. But anyway, so Tatum dies. We get the scene with Sidney and Billy, and then she's still kind of suspicious of him. Like, who'd you call? Like, oh, it would have been a really good way to throw me off if he called me in jail. And then conveniently, right as they're talking about this, Billy gets killed. We find out later, obviously, he actually didn't. And watching the scene back, it's painfully obvious he didn't actually get killed. And it was fake blood. I mean, there's no holes in his shirt, there's no stab wounds or anything. But when you're watching it for the first time, at least when I was, I didn't realize that at all. I didn't pick up on it. Like, oh shit, Billy's dead, so it's not Billy. So who the hell is it then? And then everything from here on out is great. Just more very intense scenes, building the suspense. Like the scene in particular with Sidney in the car where Ghostface has the keys and he keeps unlocking it. She has to keep moving back and forth and locking it. Such a great scene. Then he comes in the trunk and we see the trunk, going up and then slowly going in there. Awesome stuff. We get the scene with Gale Weathers in the truck and then having to wipe the blood off the windshield. So many great, memorable, iconic moments in this movie. I can't say enough about it. And then I'm trying to remember if I missed anything during this whole time. Gale crashes, so we think that she's dead. And then it's another small issue I have with the movie is people survive things they probably shouldn't survive, but I also understand that they're doing that because that's what horror movies do, and this movie is a self-aware horror movie. So on one hand, it's a little annoying, but on the other hand, I totally get it. So, and then, there's the whole thing. I think one thing that confused me is Ghostface stabs Sidney. Like, what happened there? That happened so fast, and every time I watch it scene, that I get a little bit confused as to what actually happened there, because he did stab her and she didn't, like, they get her in the shoulder. I don't remember. I'm trying to think back. I know I just watched the movie, but the way that scene was shot, it's like it didn't even hit anything. Like she had, like they were stabbing Wilson Fisk, Kingpin or something. You know how it doesn't really do anything because he's got the vest on it. Or in Hawkeye's case, he's basically a super person. He's enhanced. Anyway, that always confused me, throws me off because it happened so quickly. Wait, what just happened there? But I think maybe you do end up seeing a stab wound later in the movie in her shoulder. I can't remember, but that's just something that I wanted to point out real quick. And then, so after that, we get the part where Sidney's going back in the house. She sees Dewey got stabbed in the back, and now we think Dewey said, Jesus, everyone in this movie's dying. Randy and Stu are arguing like, no, he did it. Another amazing scene, because you don't know who to trust, because you totally believe it could be either one of them. You're like, shit, now what? And you're feeling exactly how Sidney's feeling this moment. Like, I can't trust either one of you, so I gotta shut the door and just go in here. And she says, fuck you both. Like, what else are you gonna do? I mean, how do you know at this point who it is? You don't. There's really no way of knowing if you're in Sidney's place. And this is... that scene was intense as hell. The first time watching it, like, my heart was pounding. I'm like, holy shit, who is it? Because you figure it's got to be one of those two now, unless it's Sidney's dad. But it wouldn't make sense if they're both innocent for them to be doing that. Great scene. They're each saying that it was the other person, and they're both kind of losing it. She goes inside. Billy comes back down, basically falls down the stairs, act like he's still at this point acting like he got stabbed. He's like, oh, I'm like a stuck pig. But somehow still alive, which we're more confused about. And then this scene showcases even more than when he got stabbed, is that there's no wound, there's no holes in his shirt or stab wounds or anything. What the fuck is going on here? He lets in Randy after Sidney gives him the gun, which was a huge mistake. But from her point of view, again, it makes sense, because why would she have any reason to believe that there's two killers and he's one of them at this point? She saw him get stabbed by Ghostface, and she thinks he's all bloodied, so it makes sense that she would do that. Randy comes in, and probably the best part in the entire movie is when Randy's like, Stu flipped out, he's gone mad. Billy, we all go a little mad sometimes. And shoots him.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
No, Billy!
Wow. Talk about a killer reveal. I got chills just talking about that, just thinking about that scene. Incredible. Just the way that Skeet Ulrich delivers that, we all go a little mad sometimes. Perfect. And again, even though throughout the entire movie, they've been telling us how creepy he is, we didn't think it'd be him because it'd be too obvious. And now it is. So that's why it's so brilliant. It's reverse psychology. Like, oh shit, wait a minute. And at this point, we're still not quite putting everything together that there's probably another killer. Because it's like, oh shit, it is Billy. And then she runs over to Stu, and Stu's got the voice changer, like, surprise, Sidney. Awesome stuff. Oh man. Just, again, thinking about this scene gives me chills and is so great. When I watched it the other night, I appreciated it more than I had previously. Every time I watch this movie and this killer reveal, this entire sequence, I love it more and more. The fact that Billy and Stu are the killers is great, and they are great killers. Billy, again, they did such a great job with making us think that there's no way it can be him. And then the thing with the phone, and he didn't call her because he was in jail. I'm like, oh shit. So that threw us off. And then the thing with him getting stabbed, and that threw us off even more. It's like, oh, it's not him then. And then it's two killers, which obviously now we know, like, Scream does that a lot, where they have two killers. But when we're watching this for the first time, and we hadn't seen any of the other movies, and we didn't really know what the franchise was all about, and we didn't know any spoilers, we would never think that it could be two people. We just assumed that Ghostface was one person, so when we saw Billy get stabbed, we thought that was it. It couldn't possibly be him. And we find out it's two people. Just great. And both Matthew Lillard and Skeet Ulrich's performances during this scene are absolutely phenomenal. They are so good together, and just a great pairing of killers. Probably, I mean, there's one, well, I don't know. I'd still say they're the best killers of the entire franchise, and certainly the best killer reveal with the delivery of Billy saying we all go a little mad sometimes, and then Stu having the voice changer. Awesome stuff. And then them kind of telling her about, everything they did and how they killed her mom and framed Cotton Weary for it, and then how this is the 1 year anniversary and how they're going to blame everything on her dad. Her dad's there. They kidnapped him. He's not dead with his eyes gouged out like Randy thought he would be, but he is kidnapped. And they're going to blame it all on him. Kill Sidney, stab each other, and then they're both going to survive and they'll be the heroes so they can plan the sequel. All great. And then, obviously, you get a little bit of a motivation. At first they say there's no motivation. I mean, did Norman Bates have motivation? Hannibal Lecter? No, it's scarier when there's no motivation. But Billy does have one. His motivation is that Sidney's mom was sleeping with his dad, and that's the reason that his mom left. So, there you go. And then Stu, it's another great moment, another small moment, is Stu hearing this. You can see the look on his face like, oh shit. I feel like he didn't know this already. Like, you feel like he's hearing this for the first time because he look on his face like, whoa, damn. He thought you're both just killing because they wanted to. Like, it's scary when you don't have a motivation. So that I love that scene. And then you kind of, as the scene goes on, you get the sense that Stu is more of a lapdog, especially when he's talking to Sidney and he says peer pressure. And honestly, I kind of believe that. He's kind of an idiot, and I totally buy that Stu is the guy in charge here, and he's doing this for this reason. That Billy is the guy in charge here, and he's doing this for this reason, and then Stu's just following along. I totally buy it. It makes sense based on their dynamic and the way he's acted throughout the movie. The way Billy's acted, I thought that all made sense. So another small issue I want to point out for this movie is why the hell didn't they kill Sidney before they start stabbing each other? It's like, really? This is more of villains doing dumb stuff. Now, they're certainly not the smartest, so it sort of makes sense. But come on, guys. Kill Sidney first, and then start stabbing each other. Gale shows up, saves the day, even though the safety's on. Billy's about to kill Gale, and then they realize that Sidney's gone. Now, another thing that villains tend to do in movies is when something else comes up and they're about to kill someone, why don't they just still kill them? It only take a second. Like, he could have still shot Gale and then went on to find Sidney. But anyway, I absolutely love the scene where Sidney calls them and she's now using the voice changer. Great, great stuff. And Billy's flipping out and ripping the pillows and everything. He throws the phone at Stu, which was improvised, by the way, or at least who wasn't supposed to hit him with the phone. And then Stu says, hit him with the phone, dick. All that was improvised, which was awesome. And Stu, throughout this entire thing, he's like crying and he's about to die. And he says his mom and dad are going to be so mad at him. Just incredible stuff from Matthew Lillard. He is phenomenal and perfect for this kind of role, which is crazy because I always think of him as Shaggy. And I saw Scooby-Doo before I saw this, even though it came out after. So watching Shaggy do this, I always thought was pretty funny. And then you get the thing where she's in the Ghostface costume, comes out the closet, and stabs Billy, which is awesome. Okay. I have to go back. One more thing. I love that Halloween is playing on the TV in the background during this entire sequence because it adds more tension. You hear the Halloween music and Laurie screaming and everything and crying and everything, and it's phenomenal. And it's timed perfectly with everything that's happening throughout this movie. And then Dewey comes in and he thinks that what's on the TV is actually happening. And then there's a thing with Jamie Kennedy, Randy, who says, Jamie, turn around, Jamie. And the actor's name is Jamie, and Ghostface is right behind him. And he's talking to Jamie Lee Curtis in the movie, and he's the one with the killer behind him, and he's not turning around. I thought that was so funny. That kind of thing is, again, perfect balance between real horror and horror satire. That was so good. I got a good kick out of that. And again, another time, though, where the villain could have just killed him real quick. Although at this point he only had the knife, maybe it took a little bit longer, so that made a little bit more sense. But anyway, that's something I really enjoyed. And the whole idea of Halloween playing this entire time just adds so much to the vibe and the tension and the atmosphere of this entire sequence. So I love that. She comes out and stabs Billy, and then Stu comes out and she hits him, drops a TV on him. Awesome. And then, Billy comes back and is about to stab Sidney, and Gale shoots him, and then we find out Randy's alive, so Gale's alive, Randy's alive. Randy only got shot in the shoulder, so that makes sense, and he makes the joke where he's like, I never thought I'd be so happy to be a virgin. Fucking love Randy, he's awesome. And then he's like, this is the moment where the supposedly dead killer comes back for one last scare. And he comes, and then Sidney shoots him in the head. Not in my movie. Amazing. Just amazing. And again, this is one that every time I watch it, it gets better and better, and I appreciate it more and more for what a staple in the horror genre it is and how game-changing and smart and clever this movie was. I pick up on things more and more every time I watch it. I don't have enough. I mean, there's so many good things I can say about this movie. I went throughout the movie saying everything I love about it. Dewey's alive, we find out too. That's okay. I mean, he got stabbed in the back. You can certainly survive being stabbed in the back. A lot of people did die, though. I mean, Tatum died. Casey and Steve at the beginning. I'm trying to think who else. Oh, the cameraman. Certainly there were... I guess, was that it? Maybe. So maybe this movie... Oh, Principal Himbry doesn't have as high of a kill count as I thought, to be honest. Maybe some of the future movies have higher kill counts, but no, nobody else... no random people at the party got killed, did they? So you think about this movie as a big kill fest, and there aren't actually that many kills, so I just found that interesting. And another thing people point out about this movie is that the kills are pretty lackluster compared to some of the other, like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Halloween as far as creativity goes. That's not something that I've always cared about that much in horror movies. I don't think creative kills is something you need for a movie like Scream. I don't think that is really what the movie is about, and it's really not that necessary. So that doesn't really bother me. Although I did enjoy the garage door kill, even though it doesn't make any sense. All the other kills were pretty straightforward. I never minded that. I'm not someone... I think certainly there are types of movies, certain movies in the horror genre that will benefit from having these very elaborate kills. But I don't think that Scream is one that really needs all that necessarily. Although I did hear that the new one has some cool kills, so that'll be fun. So yeah, guys, Scream's awesome. I don't think it's like an absolute like masterpiece, like a 10 out of 10, one of my favorite movies ever. Like, it's not quite there, but it's certainly one of the best horror movies, and it kicks off possibly my favorite horror genre, and my horror franchise, and I can't wait for the new one to come out. So this, such an awesome movie, and again, it's one that gets better with every watch. Does so many great things. The mystery of it, trying to figure out who the killer is, the fact that the killers are human, the satirical nature of it, where it's kind of a deconstruction of the horror genre, but while also keeping the horror aspect of it, where it doesn't lose that. So it finds that balance perfectly. Great. It's so funny. Randy is awesome. Stu, Billy, Sidney is the best final girl of all time. So much to love about this movie. And I, obviously, even though I have a few nitpicks of it, mostly just some plot holes here and there from the opening scene and Tatum's death and then some stuff at the end. But overall, I think the movie's great, and it certainly is one of my favorite, as far as like pure horror movies go, like if you're not including thrillers, which I include in horror, like Seven and Frailty and Fallen, stuff like that. As far as pure horror movies go, Scream is definitely one of my favorites, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. So there you have it, guys. What do you think about Scream? I'm sure if you're this point in the video, you've probably seen it. If you haven't, that sucks because I just ruined the entire movie for you. But what do you think of the movie? Is my rating too low? Now, I get shit for only giving movies 8 out of 10 sometimes. 8 out of 10 is very, very good for me. I hardly ever go higher than that. Like, if you look at my Letterboxd, I've only given, so it's a 5-star system. I've only given 27 4.5s and 10 5s in my entire life. So under 40 movies I've ever given above a 4 to 5 star rating. Just keeping that in perspective, 8 out of 10 is a very, very good rating for me. That's also what I gave No Way Home, which was my favorite movie of last year. So don't think that me giving a movie an 8 out of 10 is a disservice to it. No, it's a compliment. Trust me, that's a very phenomenal movie. And I moved it up. It would have been probably a 7.5 before this most recent rewatch. But Scream is awesome. And what do you guys think about it? I feel like most people really like the first Scream movie. The sequels are a little bit hit or miss for some people, but this first one is very popular. The franchise overall is very popular. I talked to my friend about this recently. It's really nice to see people talking about this franchise so much and how they love it, and seeing people watch the movies for the first time and seeing their reactions on YouTube and on Twitter and stuff. Awesome. It's a great, great horror franchise, and I absolutely cannot wait for the new one. I can't wait to watch 2, 3, and 4, do my reviews for those, so stay tuned for those. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Likes are super, super important for the channel. And also, give me a little bit of feedback. Do you enjoy these types of videos? Do you like this full-on spoiler videos where I go in-depth, scene to scene, and kind of analyze things more specifically and in-depth than I typically do with my spoiler-free reviews? If you enjoy this stuff, let me know. And subscribe if you enjoy my content in general. Hit the notification bell to get notified when I post a video. Again, I got my 2, 3, and 4 reviews coming and some other cool stuff. Probably once I finish my Scream series, my Scream review series and then ranking, I should have a little bit of room to work on some of the more unique ideas that I have. So stay tuned for that. And I guess that's it. See you guys soon.